I'm going to introduce Christy Cavanis real quick, and she is going to introduce our speaker.
Some of you may have seen us in the earlier program, so I'm glad you're back again, if you did. My name is Christy Cavanis, and I manage the outreach team that works with Skills Development Fund, Self-Sufficiency Fund, High Demand, and TIP. And Robert's got some great, I said his name. He's got some great info for you. Wanted to recognize too our director, the director of our division, Outreach and Employer Initiatives is here, Mary York. Yay! And then back in the corner is my team. So please ask questions if there's anything we can do to help or answer. And we still have money. That's all I got to say. In the words of Commissioner Demerson, a man who needs no introduction.
Yes. Okay. With that, good afternoon, everyone. So I'm going to cover a couple of programs and how they work, and then we're going to talk about a couple of projects for high demand, and a couple of projects for the Texas Industry Partnership Program. Well, it's interactive, so feel free to ask questions as we go. But the point of our discussion today is to give you an idea of how to utilize these funds towards a project in your community, or if you've had a project and you want to perhaps take another look at how you might want to manage the program. This is a good opportunity to do that. So this is working, right? Hold on. 1 second. Okay. We're having some technical difficulties. So while we're trying to get this, the technical difficulties overcome, I want to give you some insight as to what we're going to try to accomplish. So each year, the program actually receives about $1 million in each of the programs, the high demand and TIP. This is not on my presentation, but I'll give you some insight. This year, we've had a number of inquiries, but we've not had a whole lot of applications. In fact, we've had a lot of requests for information and some project development. So we thought maybe we should take another look at what we're doing and maybe give you some insight. So this year I have about $600,000 in the high demand job training grant and about $1.2 million on the TIP side. So the Texas Industry Partnership Grant still has quite a considerable amount of money. So again, I'm Robert Andrade. I'm with the Employer Engagement and Community Outreach Department of the Outreach and Employer Initiatives Division. So today our agenda, we're going to cover our purpose, overview of the programs, and then we'll go right into some projects that we've had over the last fiscal year. And then we'll take some additional questions from the audience, including the chat that's online. Purpose of our session. We're going to discuss some examples of projects which were awarded last year in 2021 under the High Demand Job Training Program and the Texas Industry Partnership. We'll field some questions on how and why these workforce community projects were built. We'll discuss what sorts of issues were tackled in the process, and then we'll learn how these issues were resolved. So first, a little bit over the programs. So under the High Demand Job Training Program, this program was actually created in 2015. It was a collective. The idea came from the Economic Development Council. Our former chair of our agency, Andres Alcantar, Carlton Schwab was with still with Texas Economic Development Council, and our now commissioner at the time was the director of OEI, Aaron Demerson. They came together to discuss what workforce boards and economic development is doing together. So this was a collaboration of them coming up with a program that would actually assist them. So the idea behind the high demand job training program is to create a collaboration between the workforce boards and the economic developers. We focus on demand occupations or targeted occupations in the local workforce region. And as you know, the 28 workforce region is, they have different targets or different demands. They work together and they utilize the funds that actually fund these two programs. And this is the Workforce Innovation Opportunity Act funds and the local economic development sales tax fund. This is focused on economic development eligible projects. Keep that in mind, because not everything they can fund. There's only a certain number of projects they can fund. So the boards can apply for $150,000 a year. The EDCs will match each contribution dollar for dollar. We will only match up to $150,000. The projects are demand or targeted occupations. This year, we have $1 million. It's a first come, first serve, and the funds are available through August 31st, 2021. So what can we fund? The allowable activities are instructor salaries, tuition, equipment, consumable supplies, student transportation, minor renovations, but this does not include recruitment or outreach activities. But this is the question I get a considerable amount of times. Who can provide the training? Well, just about anybody. Universities, colleges, independent school districts, private training companies, and nonprofits. That's right. ISDs can actually participate. And in a bit, we'll actually discuss a couple of projects that we've actually funded through this particular program. So who can be a partner? We're looking at only economic development corporations as listed in the Local Government Code Title 12, Subchapter C1, Chapters 501 to 505, which covers every economic development corporation. If it doesn't say corporation at the end, chances are it's not a corporation, so it's not eligible. For example, the San Antonio Economic Development Foundation is not a corporation. So when you're in your community, make sure that you note that when you begin to have this discussion. Under the Texas Industry Partnership Program, this program actually was established in 2017 after we realized that some of the communities do not have an economic development corporation. We found that South Texas, which is the Laredo region, they do not have an economic development corporation anywhere in the region. So we realized, well, they can't capitalize on those funds. So this program was developed. So this one is to assist those communities. It leverages private investment from employers, employer foundations, same funding source, WIOA funds, and we match dollar for dollar up to $150,000 per year. The cap is $150,000, but you can break these projects up into several. So it doesn't have to be just one project, it can be several. We focus on the industry clusters as stated by the Governor's Economic Development Department. There's only 6. The budgeted amount this year is $1.4 million. And as I said earlier, we're just under 1.3, which is unusual. By this time last year, I had already eaten up about 600,000. So this is an unusual occurrence. What can we actually fund? This is a little more exciting. Same as you saw, training, instructor salaries, tuition, equipment, consumable supplies, mentoring, skills assessment, support services, student transportation, cluster analysis. So if your community is looking to develop perhaps at your industry cluster, or you're looking at a workforce-related study, this is a good area in which you can actually tap some money. So this, again, works from your industry partner. They contribute funds, and then we meet those funds or match those funds. Again, this does not include recruitment and outreach activities. Now, again, who can provide the training? In this particular case, again, universities, colleges, independent school districts, private training companies, and nonprofit trainers. So just about anybody in your community can actually capitalize on these funds. Who can be a partner? Ideally, the first two, business foundation or industry foundation. A business corporation not self-serving. So in other words, they're going to get training and they're going to use it just for their business. And we want the funds to actually be utilized for the community as a whole. A business consortium, a business association, a nonprofit industry focused, and other similar philanthropic organizations. So we're going to get to the meat of why we're here. So this first projects we're going to discuss is the Northeast Texas project. So before I introduce him, let me say this about this particular workforce board. Outside of South Plains, Northeast Texas capitalizes on these funds every single year. They're probably the one board that spends equal to or just about equal to what South Plains does. Now, what do I mean by that? Each year under the high demand job training program, I have two boards that submit an application for the full amount. It's Workforce Solutions South Plains and Workforce Solutions Northeast Texas. Now, the way they approach their projects is not unique, but it's incredibly helpful and it has a lasting impact. And I'll let the person that's here to speak on it, speak on it. So they've had two submissions last year in 2021. They had grant amounts for $62,361 and a second one for $86,193. Their financial partners on one grant was Sulphur Springs EDC, and the second one was Mount Pleasant EDC in Paris, Texas, Paris EDC. We matched those amounts. The trainers were Sulphur Springs ISD and Paris College on one grant. On the second grant, it was Mount Pleasant ISD, Harts Bluff ISD, Chapel Hill ISD, Paris Junior College, and Northeast Texas Community College. Now you're asking yourself, how did they manage to get all of those entities funding? So Bart, I asked Bart to come in. Bart Spivey is a business development and community relations project manager for Workforce Solutions Northeast Texas. He's been with the Workforce Solutions Northeast Texas for 11 years. In his role with the board, Bart works with a number of employers across the region on workforce development initiatives. He also works closely with many of the board's partners, including community colleges, economic development corporations, chambers of commerce. Current projects and initiatives include teacher externships, high demand job training grants, innovation grant, LEAP Youth Career Expos. So Bart, could you give us a little more information on your projects?
Sure. Thanks, Robert. And as he mentioned, my name is Bart Spivey with the Northeast Texas Workforce Board. He mentioned our two projects from last year. I think of it as one project. We just submitted it at two different times. But I will go back and kind of lay the foundation of where we got, how we got to this point, because we've had, I think, maybe 5 or 6 of these grants so far since the program started. And it really is helpful to have an existing relationship and partnership with your EDCs, your economic development partners, and your education partners. We have a economic development advisory group to our board. So all of our EDC partners, we meet at least twice annually to go over these types of projects and other things. But we always mention these high demand job training grants, Texas Industry Partnership grants, the Skills Development Fund grants. We always mention these grants as opportunities and keep them top of mind. So the way we start each year when we get information about the new funding for the high demand job training grants is I send an email to all of my EDC partners, letting them know that we can again apply for the grants and finding out, you know, who's interested. So up to this point, we've already explained to all of them what the program is. If we get a new EDC partner, we'll bring them in, have a conversation with them about the program, show them what we've done in the past. And that has happened in both Mount Pleasant and Paris. We've changed EDC directors in those two areas, and we've had grants with both the old director and the new director now. So we sent an email to all of our EDC partners and asked them to let us know if they're interested. Once I get that information and make a few phone calls to the others just to make sure they didn't miss the email, we then ask those partners to let us know the max amount of match funds they're willing to commit. So as Robert mentioned, we have 150,000 total for our board area. What are they willing to commit from each of the EDCs. And then once we get that dollar amount, then we adjust those based on, getting us to that $150,000 limit. We've never been under that, aside from, just a couple $1,000s, maybe the project didn't fully fund, but we always have at least 3, sometimes 4 EDC partners commit to the program, and they always want to give the full amount. I actually have one EDC that has told me every time we do this, he says he'll do the full amount every time. If nobody else wants to do it, he'll put up $150,000 because he says it's an easy sell to his board and to the employer community that you take $1 of sales tax, economic development dollars, and turn it into 2. And it goes towards high demand career training. And that's just something that, is top of mind for economic development and site selectors. If you can show that you're investing in workforce development and high demand jobs in the region, that's an easy sell to the people that make that decision. So once we get all of our partners and get their amounts kind of lined out, I ask them to send me kind of a draft of what their plan is. So I ask them to go to their employers and find out what kind of training they need. And then go to the education partners and find out, do we already have this training? Do we need to increase capacity? Do we need to add some new equipment to keep up with the technology that's in our employer operations? And that's really been the 2 main things that we've done, is to add equipment to either increase capacity or add equipment to kind of keep up with training standards for our manufacturing employers. So after they go out to them, ask them to send me a plan with that information, their employer partners, their education partners, the demand occupation that they're focusing on. We send them the list each time it's updated, and each year we send out the information for these grants. I'll send them the list of our demand occupations so that they know, what they have to choose from. And then I ask them to kind of let us know why there's a need for that. That's part of the application that we submit to TWC. What's the need for this training? Why do we need to increase capacity or buy new equipment? And then once we have all of that kind of developed, we'll have a quick meeting with the partners, go over the application and get it ready to submit. I will say the application process is super simple. The reporting process is simple. It's really just a great program, and once you can convey that to your economic development partners, I think they'll feel the same way. Robert mentioned we had 2 projects. The only reason it wasn't one application was because I had one EDC that was ready to go about 2 or 3 months ahead of the others. So we went ahead and submitted that application, and then once we had the others ready to go, we submitted that at a later date. So you can submit with different partners at different times as well. And to get into a little bit of the projects from last year, in Sulphur Springs, they chose to work with the local ISD, Sulphur Springs ISD, and they partnered with Clayton Homes, which is a modular home manufacturer located in Sulphur Springs. So they basically build mobile homes, modular homes from the ground up in their facility. It's kind of a neat process, but they take it from the frame and then add the walls and the electrical components, the plumbing, everything from start to finish in that facility. And so they've been working with the ISD to upgrade their construction technology program. And what we were able to do with this particular grant, which was a $62,000 from the EDC matched with TWC funds to purchase a forklift, electric pallet jack, radial arm saws, table saws, welders, just a lot of equipment, the same equipment, mind you, that is located in the Clayton Homes facility. We got their input on that type of equipment. We want them to have that real world work experience in the high school classroom that they can easily transfer into the workplace. Our second project, which was multiple EDCs and multiple education partners, the first one was Paris Junior College. They committed a match of $23,608. So again, what they were willing to commit was less, which is fine. We just work out the numbers and get to that max amount each year. But They partnered with several, the Paris area, Lamar County area has several metal fabrication shops, trailer manufacturers, pipe manufacturers. So a new type of welding, the new equipment that these employers are using is called high frequency welders. And Paris Junior College had a couple, but not enough to meet the demand that these employers have for the workforce. So we were able to use the EDC funds and the TWC funds to purchase 5 new high frequency welders, and it took their welding program from a capacity of about 25 people per semester up to 75. So they greatly increased their capacity. They're working closely with their employer partners. And that's really an added benefit to this program is you're bringing in employers and EDCs and education and workforce all together. And it not only is shown through this, but it kind of manifests into other projects as well. So it's a great way to bring all of those partners to the table. The other EDC was Mount Pleasant, and they had typically only partnered with Northeast Texas Community College in the past. That's their local community college, but this time they kind of threw me for a loop. They added in 3 extra ISDs, and they all did different projects. So it doesn't have to be the same thing. When we first started, I think our first grant, we did all the same thing across 3 different community colleges, but as we've grown, we've allowed them to customize their application to their needs. So they did partner again with NTCC. They purchased PLC training and robotics to increase their capacity there from about 30 students a year to 60 students a year at their industrial training center. They partnered with the Mount Pleasant ISD to purchase a number of, I guess you'd call them mannequins for health science classes to better prepare students who want to go into that career field. They partnered with 2 very small, so Mount Pleasant ISD is the large school there in Mount Pleasant, and then there's 2 very small, Chapel Hill and Harts Bluff. Chapel Hill, they partnered with them and were able to purchase some hardware needed to upgrade their virtual training capacity. So typically they bus students to the college's industrial training center, but with this grant, we're able to increase their virtual training capacity so that they can do some of that on campus and don't have to leave campus to do some of that coursework. And then Harts Bluff ISD purchased, I think, 2 welding machines to greatly increase the capacity and the technology found in their welding program. So those are the projects we've done. We've got another one actually in application form right now. Hopefully Robert's ready to sign off on that one. Sulphur Springs ISD is looking to add automotive mechanics equipment to help students prepare for working on electric vehicles. And they actually have agreements with 3 of the local car dealerships where if a student is in the program, they'll automatically qualify for an internship with the employer, and then completing that, they'll go on and be able to accept full-time employment there. And then Mount Pleasant is working again with NTCC on some new robotics equipment that some of their local manufacturers are really pushing for and really wanting to see that capability in the community college training program. So I think that's all good. Thank you.
He's done a lot with his money over the years. Those are just a couple of projects and the things that he's working on now. That electric vehicle project is wonderful. This next one I'm going to cover is one with our partners with Workforce Solutions Golden Crescent. I do want to acknowledge Executive Director Henry Guajardo and Mike Milson over at the Workforce Solutions Golden Crescent. They sent me a summary of their project. So they did something a little different. So the way Bart approaches it, Bart approaches each of the EDCs and then they submit. Well, Golden Crescent had a little different approach. What they did is they put a solicitation out. They asked each of the training entities to submit their project. They had already had some funding from the Victoria Sales Tax Development Corporation. They had received funding for the match. So 150,000 is what the corporation was giving. But now they had to find projects. So they asked each of the entities in their community to apply. And so what they did essentially is by putting that out, they got 2 responses. They got one from Victoria College, and the second one was from Mid-Coast Construction Academy. Now, as you know, Victoria College is a Victoria College. They are a college within our college system, but we're actually working with Victoria ISD. So the Victoria ISD was the beneficiary of the funds, and this is more of a dual credit opportunity for them. Under the Mid-Coast Construction Academy, they are a construction-based company. Their parent company is the Contractors Association. So the ABC, the American Contractors Association, they have met more than one time, and they've applied for a TIP grant prior. And what they did is they built a plumbing and electricians program. The request total was for $141,000 with the money. The money that they were requesting, essentially, they were lucky. They got both the maximum amounts from both organizations, and they applied them towards a couple of projects. So their focus was on information technology, energy, biotechnology, and construction. And their occupations that they were targeting were computer network specialists, electrical power linemen and repair, licensed vocational nurses. They also focused on truck driving, heavy tractor trailer, electricians, plumbers, pipe fitters, and steam fitters. Now, originally, they asked for funding for sheriff's patrol officers. We told them we couldn't focus on public sector jobs, so they withdrew that money, but they found another way to actually use their money. So rather than focus our grant towards that funding, they actually utilized the private funds towards that training. So they were able to still be able to fund those 2 programs under the sheriff's patrol officers. Now, this particular project, again, the total amount was $145,450. It trained 260 people at a cost per trainee at $559. What they paid for essentially was they paid for networking course, CCNA. They paid for a Powerline worker program, a vocational nursing medication program, Powerline workers program, a truck driving program, and those last 2 were tuition reimbursement. And the last one were certifications for MCA safety certification and NCCER computer-based exams. So the way they capitalized on their funds is they used them for multiple purpose. They were able to do some tuition reimbursement, they bought some equipment, and they did also use the money for certification. So you can capitalize on these funds towards workforce initiatives within your community. Now, this next project I'm going to discuss is the Texas Industry Partnership Program. So I'm going to ask Linda to come up. So Linda Angels is the Deputy Executive Director for Workforce Solutions Central Texas. She's worked with public employment professional for 30 years plus. She works with Workforce Solutions Central Texas, and she's been responsible for quality initiatives, performance management, grant project development and support, research, strategic planning for numerous workforce programs, representing a budget totaling over $60 million. So when I took this, this side note, when I took this program on, I had to go to certain people in the state that I felt that would really understand our program and what we were trying to accomplish. Linda was one of those people that I would frequently go back to and ask her the sort of projects that she was pursuing and why. And so when I first started to put this panel together, I realized I needed to probably visit with Linda to discuss her projects. Now, she had 3 projects last year, and I'm only noting 2, but she actually had 3. She had one with the Texas Ford Dealer Advertising Fund Incorporated, Don Ringler Automotive Group, and Toyota Motor Company. She had a separate one with Mastech. So they utilized all of their funds last year, but they pushed those funds towards various initiatives. So the way I like most communities to approach their usage of funds is to look at what your needs are and don't pigeonhole yourself to one area. So I'm going to let Linda speak on that. So Linda, please.
Okay, so he covered the fact that we had three, but our approach is somewhat different. What we do is we use the funding available through the Workforce Commission's business services areas to help our businesses. So when we're meeting with our different employers and has anyone met with an employer lately who hasn't said we can't find workers? I mean, that's everybody's problem. So what we do is we talk about where do you usually find workers? What is your workforce pipeline? And almost always they don't, they're not tapping into the colleges. They're not tapping into ISDs. They're looking for workers where they found them in the past. So through the Texas Industry Partnership Grant, what we're able to do is show them a way to create a workforce pipeline out of the schools, whether it's an ISD, whether it's a community college, but a way that they're developing their own. Through a Texas Industry Partnership Grant, they can pay, they're paying for training anyway. They're hiring people, they're paying for training. So we remind them that half of that cost could be covered and they could get the exact training that they need for incoming workers. So it's a way to work with the colleges or the universities or the training provider of their choice to get the exact training for their employees, not for any employee in general. So overall, it's a model that employers really, really like once they get the concept that a small investment can lead to a constant pipeline of workers. So that's the big overview of how we sell this. And that's why we have three instead of one, because we're not starting with we're going to go out and do a project. We're talking to employers. And when an employer says, I will invest, then we go to the Workforce Commission. We create the partnership. Robert does all the paperwork, so don't worry about that. It's one of this. I write a lot of grants. This is a pretty simple one. So when you're trying to do this is not a complex system. It's one that's just meant to help training providers and help employers. So I'm going to talk about the three that we've done last year. The first one is really cool and very unique, and that it says on there, what does it say? Texas Ford Dealers Advertising something another. It's actually the Texas Ford Dealers Association. So all of the Ford dealers in Texas have an association, and they all agree that they cannot find technicians, people to fix the cars. And they need to have 5 different certifications before they can start working on cars. They have to work on brakes and air conditioning and blah, blah, blah stuff. And, don't you love blah, blah, blah? But in general, they have 5. And so they approached and they wanted people who had at least a general experience. So they decided they wanted transitioning soldiers. That's in our alley because we have Fort Hood in our back door. So they worked through all of the requirements to go on to Fort Hood and recruit soldiers. And they paid $200,000 to Central Texas College to start a training program there. And then they worked with us to get matching funds to buy 5 training vehicles. So in the same way that you're about to do training vehicles, they have 5 Ford vehicles that are at CTC site. Half of it was paid for through the Workforce Commission through a TIP grant, and half of it was paid by the Texas Ford Dealers Association. And just so y'all understand all of the background on that, when you do that, the board retains the titles for those vehicles. So we own the 5 vehicles. They're at Central Texas College, and they're used as a training vehicle. Anyone who does training vehicles should know that a board has to pay the taxes and licensing. So when you're making that budget, be sure and put in taxes and licensing because you have to pay those fees, even though the vehicles won't be on the road, you still have to pay that fees. That was a little learning moment that we'd like to share. anyway, in that grant between Ford, now I said they already paid $200,000 to Central Texas College to set up the training program and to train the instructors. Then they gave us another $100,000 to match with training vehicles, a little over. So they did $209,000 total investment for the TIP grant. And over the course of the first year, they committed to training and hiring 60 people. And you might be thinking that's a lot of money for 60 people, but what this grant doesn't show is they did 60 people the first year. Now they do 4 cohorts a year of up to 20 each time. So they try to train about 80 technicians a year. It's a total of 16 weeks training while they're still in the military. So the military's paying them to be at work. They go train on the works at the Central Texas College, and then the dealerships pay for a month of them to go to the training site where they're going to work, and they pay for their room and board somewhere in Texas so that they are completely trained to be a Ford technician, and they walk out of the Army straight into a job. When they do this, we have a different grant, just so you can understand how funds are leveraged. So I'm giving you the really big picture here. I hope that's okay. When they get the job and they get that job offer, we have a different grant, a National Dislocated Worker Grant. So we don't want our soldiers leaving the military and going straight into debt. We pay for their initial basic toolkit with Ford as soon as they're hired, and we pay that $4,000 for them. So it's a really, when you talk about a comprehensive system of how do we get a pipeline of employees, we do try to leverage our funds. We do have a very large partnership that sets things up so that it's not a single source of funds or a single requirement. And it's very systematic in the way that we are trying to put people back to work in that program. It has been so popular that the National Ford dealership is looking to make the Central Texas location their National Technician Training Center. So it's a big success. And the other, just to get you on notice, is they are adding electric vehicles as well. So we'll be coming back for electric vehicles for that program. So that's the Ford one. We're excited. The next one we have, and this one, you have small town business too. Not everyone is, the Ford Dealers Association, but Don Ringler is an automotive dealership, and he has more than one dealership. He works with Toyota Motor Group, and just like everyone else, they need technicians. So we're having a theme going on this automotive thing, but they wanted to create people right out of high school that they could hire and train them on the culture and how to be an automotive technician with the Toyota industry. So now we moved to a new industry. And in high school, what they wanted to do was put the same types of tools. And now that I've been involved in this, I will tell you that automotive has very, very specific and very detailed tools that they need to do the jobs of fixing our cars with all the computer and things in it. It is not the wrench that you might be having in your head. So they needed tools. They needed toolkits, and they wanted the CTE program in high school to use their tools and learn how to work on their equipment. So again, we did another match. This one was a smaller amount. The total amount was $33,500. So the kids graduated high school. Probably shouldn't call them kids. The young adults graduated high school with the ability to go to work at Don Ringler or at another Toyota dealership. And they did 221 the first year. And whenever I say the first year, it's because the investment doesn't leave just because the students graduate. In all of these programs, we have an initial what we're going to do over the course of the year, but Ford is still training, and the CTE program, this one I think was Temple ISD, they're still training. So they're doing about 200 technicians a year out of high school and about 80 technicians a year right now out of Fort Hood. So now for the final one, this one's pretty cool. I should have told you that the Ford dealership is also an apprenticeship program. So while they're in the military and the military is paying them, they're in the pre-apprenticeship. And as they walk across with their DD-214 is how you get out of the Army, for y'all who don't know. They get their DD-214, they go straight to work in an apprenticeship program. So they have upward mobility from the beginning. And that's for Ford. It is also for the Mass Tech program. Now, Mass Tech is a lineman, the people who climb the poles. And there's a lot of equipment associated with climbing the poles and a lot of safety training and safety associated with the equipment. So for that program, we're able to buy the equipment for the trainees within, as they graduate. But for the classroom, they need to be trained in that same equipment. So this is the same model. We bought it's actually called supplies when it's that small, but it's the things you need to do the job so that they're being trained in the right things. So that one was a $47,324 match. So, about 23,000 each. And in that one, we train about 60 people a year for that program. And that's another one that is is associated with Fort Hood. Having Fort Hood in our back door, we have a nice pipeline of soldiers. About 800 people leave Fort Hood every month. So whereas most people are looking for soldiers, we spend a lot of time trying to reskill and get them connected to jobs that help them to sustain the lifestyle they had while they were in the military. So those are our three programs. Like I said, Robert is the guy who will make it easy for you. And our approach is we start with what employers say they need, and we try to reskill that pipeline. Okay.
Thank you, Linda. So we've heard three projects. I got one more, and I want to just quickly touch on something. Are you getting a feel for the varied projects? Are you getting an idea that the funding can actually be utilized in a manner in which fits what you need in your community? And again, it's a demand, a targeted occupation that you have for your community. So this last project, it's actually a little longer than I anticipated. So Alma Aranda, with the Workforce Development Director with the Workforce Solutions of Borderplex, they're sort of outside the box thinkers. So they were the ones that actually came to us initially and asked us if we could do a workforce study. So they had what we call a education gap study. So what they looked at is they looked at a project that had, they wanted to study all of the IT education components from K through postgraduate. They wanted to know, where are we most weak? So by studying that, they were able to look at their entire community. Are we prepared for new jobs in the IT sector? And that was a great study. And they sent us a copy of it. And in reviewing it, we realized that there's other opportunities. So subsequent to that, we had Central Texas, Capital Area actually applied for a grant for the healthcare industry. And they took a look at what they have as far as the types of education for that particular industry. So it was a good idea. But these last projects that we're going to discuss, and these are projects that they had with the Council on Regional Economic Development Expansion, Education Development, and the El Paso Community Foundation. Before I get to that one, they had two projects in 2020. And in 2020, this is fiscal year 2020, they had a project with the Texas Tech Foundation. What they were focused on is looking to assist nurses that could not finish their education because they lacked a little bit of support. So this funding was actually directed towards mitigating some of that. And so they focused on all graduates will receive a BSN degree and will be prepared for jobs in hospitals, physician offices, clinics, hospices, and some health home agencies. They were looking at students demonstrating financial need will receive training support to include licensing, certification, exam support, paid work for experience during clinical rotations, and serve as an incentive to continually improve their academic success and mitigate their need to work outside of school. So this allowed 30 students to actually focus on what they wanted to do with their careers. And that particular initiative, they put in $100,000. So the Texas Tech Foundation put $100,000 and we matched those dollars for 30 students. This was a good project, but later that same year, so what we do in June, and we'll do it probably again this year, is in June, we release funds, we release notification for funds in September. The 1st September, we let you know that these funds are available to all boards. But in June, if we still have money remaining, we'll release a second letter saying, if you've applied for funds this year, you can apply for funds for a second project in the same fiscal year because we have funds remaining. So they applied for a second project. And in that project, what they did is they worked with this entity that I had shown a second ago. So they worked with the what is called CREED and the El Paso Community Foundation. And so their focus was on educating STEAM instructors, people that were related to instruction of aerospace, information technology, biotechnology, and energy. Their goal was to make certain that we're able to train these students and give them a paid externship. So that first year when they put that project together, it was a lot of uncertainty. We weren't sure if they were going to be able to accomplish their goals, but they did, and they did well. So this fiscal year, they came back and did round 2. Now, typically, I caution the board to make available funds for the same project because each year it's a competitive grant. So if we use all of their money in a fiscal year, they may not be able to capitalize on those funds for that year, so they won't get funding for that same project. But in this particular case, they did, and they were able to utilize those funds for the same type of project, different set of people, but they were able to use those funds. One last thing. Some of the projects that we've had are unique to the region, energy driven. So Southeast Texas, we had a project where it was directly related to energy sector jobs. In Odessa, Midland, which is Permian Basin, we had a project that was they wanted to buy vehicles. So this is CDL, they wanted to buy a tractor and a trailer. So what we did is we actually utilized the funds to buy those things. And these are just for training purposes. A lot like what Linda did with the automotive technicians. What they did is they used that money to buy, was it 5 vehicles? Yes. It was 5 cars. And these cars, what they did is these are cars that will never be driven on the road. These are vehicles that they're going to dismantle and put them back together as training. So that's a pretty outside the box thing. But did you have any trouble with that?
Once we learned what to do, we were okay.
Okay, so the licensing of vehicles?
Yeah.
Okay, so they had to keep in mind that they did have to make certain that they licensed the vehicles. So even though they're not going to be driven, they still had to license the vehicle. But think about the types of projects that are out there that we can use, and they integrate with other programs. So I'm going to show this. We had a project about 3 years ago, and it was a registered apprenticeship program. It was an IT cybersecurity project. And what we did is we utilized our funds. It was high demand funds towards buying equipment for training. That enabled the registered apprenticeship program to be able to train the students and then go right off and actually do some on-the-job training, which is part of that whole process. That same company had relationships with area IT companies, so they were able to place those students quickly, and they had an employee of record. So we've utilized it in that field. We've also utilized it with AEL. We're developing a new program for adult education literacy for a training. So there's a number of ways. So this is where I'm going to actually open it up. How much time do we have left? Oh, we got a little bit of time. Good. I'm going to field questions. Any question? Austin Community College, you all have a question? Yes, sir. Oh, wait, hold on. We're going to bring a mic to you. Also, we have a project coming in from Dallas soon on the tip side. If you're looking for funding typically your foundations, local statewide foundations, both of them have funds that you need to apply. So typically the education entity will apply for funds. They'll hold those funds, and then your local board will apply for funds under the TIP, and then we'll match those. Yes, sir.
So quickly, like if for the matching funds,
Yes, sir.
like say we were going to do heavy equipment operator or truck driving or whatever, we the college will hire the instructors, we'll pay the instructors, we'll buy consumables, we'll buy equipment, we'll more than double or maybe quadruple or much more than say 150,000. Can we be the other partner? I mean, can we put the 150? You give us 150. And we put at least 150, maybe 500.
So we don't want public funds to be used, but if you have, I know Austin Community College has a foundation, and if the foundation wanted to contribute funds, we could match those funds.
Or a business?
A business could match those funds. Question? No, I do want to make note that in the room, we got lucky. I asked James Golson, he's the Workforce Board's grants manager. He's the counterpart to what I do. Once we've applied and you've gone through the process of getting approved, it has to get contract. Now, I want to give James a moment to just speak a little bit about their division and what they do.
Good afternoon, everybody. Just yelling. Take that a little farther away. As Robert said, my name is James Golson. I'm the Workforce Board's grant manager. I'm actually pretty new in this position. I've only been in command of our division for about 4 months now. But what Robert said is exactly right. We're the counterpart. He goes out, he recruits the projects, he finds all the great works the boards do, and we're the ones that put it together on the contracting side. Generally, our chief responsibility is moving the money around, making sure y'all get it in a timely fashion, making sure all the nuts and bolts on the contract are correct. But HJT and TIP are really unique among the grants that we run as kind of the board grants division. We're always excited to see these new projects come in. They're always very distinct. They're always really, really productive in terms of what they can do in terms of job training on the ground. So, if y'all are interested, I would encourage you, like Robert said, please do pursue one of these projects. And when it hits our desk, we'll put it together for y'all as fast as we possibly can.
So reporting, any issues, anything they have to watch out for?
Nothing that comes to mind off the top of my head. When boards lay out their projects, every time there's a pretty set reporting schedule that gets agreed upon out of the gate. If y'all have any issues with if you're not certain about something in terms of what the requirement is, if you're having issues getting a report together, questions about what you can and cannot spend grant money on, please always never hesitate to reach out to us. You can reach out directly to me. My name is James Golson, our new HJT TIP manager on our team. She lives in Smithville, so she couldn't be with us today. Her name is Marcy Lind, but she's great, very receptive to any questions as well. So we're always happy to provide as much support as we can to Robert's efforts.
One last one. Have you seen a trend on purchases?
We've seen, a lot of equipment purchases, and we've definitely, in terms of kind of unfortunate trends for the last year, some supply chain struggles. I think a lot of boards have run into that. We're trying to accommodate that as best we can. We're looking at kind of stretching out the timeline a little bit on these grants next year. We know we've hit some issues with a couple of boards having their grants expire before all the funds could be expended. So we're going to try and counter that going forward, give boards a little bit more time to try and get these things ironed out in the future.
When would you ask them to submit a request for an extension if they needed it?
If you need an extension on one of your grants, please get that in at least 30 days in advance. We tried to rush through a couple at the end of the grant cycle, and unfortunately, we're not able to move them through in time. That's just unfortunately the nature of how quickly it takes an approval to move through our system here. So in the future, but anything that comes through within or outside of the 30-day window ahead of the grant expiration period, we should have no trouble processing that on time. If there's a problem with the request, we'll follow up with y'all and let y'all know how maybe it could be modified. But please do keep that 30-day timeline in mind.
And also keep in mind that even on a purchase of equipment or supplies, there's still a training component that needs to be completed. So if you've made your purchases prior to the end of your contract and you haven't done your training yet, we can extend the period of time to actually complete the training. So keep that in mind. When you put your timeline together, make certain that you've allocated enough time to do at least 6 months or a semester's worth of training so that we know the equipment was utilized.
And just to add on to that very slightly, with some of the grants we do, a lot of what we work on are formula grants. There can be rules around and limits to those extensions. HJT and TIP grants are generally pretty easy to extend if we get the notice in time, as long as there's enough money left in the program, as long as we're not going outside the full bounds of the grant. So as long as we get that 30 days notice, if y'all need more time, we usually can give it to y'all.
Is there any questions that we have? We probably got about 10 minutes. Anybody have a question? Christy, any question? Well, I want to thank, first of all, thank you, Linda. Thank you, Bart, for participating. I always enjoy my projects with you, and I love talking with you. If I was out there in the world trying to put a project together for my community, I would look to Bart's model, a little bit at a time for your community as far as your ISDs, developing those projects that will have a long-lasting impact. South Plains did the same thing. And Linda, focusing on a large body of people that actually will affect our entire community with exiting soldiers. Gosh, I mean, wouldn't we all love to have a large labor pool as such? So with that, if there's no further questions, I want to thank you for all your time. Thank you. Oh, wait, hold on 1 second. 1 second. Oh, yes, of course. Thank you. So we are having, for the TIP project, our Texas Industry Partnership Grant, we are having a virtual forum for, these are our foundation roundtable. So this foundation roundtable is a discussion with our foundations in Texas to discuss potential collaboration regarding our Texas Industry Partnership Program. It's on June the 15th. I don't have the time in front of me. 10 a.m. It's for an hour. We'd love for you to participate, even if all you did is register and you logged on and we knew that you were listening. Any discussion points or questions that you have, feel free to send them to me prior or while you're on the conference and make your submissions. With that, thank you.